Thank you for joining the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force for today's session, CMMC Compliance, Keeping It Simple. I'm Amy Hudnall, Director of the Center of Innovation for Aerospace at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. Here in Georgia, defense is a $7.2 billion industry. Over the last 5 years, over 5,000 Georgia companies have received defense contracts. These companies represent a very diverse group of products and services, and many of these companies are small, which increases their liability for potential cybersecurity breaches. Through our outreach and grant activities, we find that many Georgia businesses still need support to understand the basics of cybersecurity and their obligation to comply with the DoD cybersecurity regulations. To meet that need, we've developed today's program. In today's session, you'll check in with familiar faces from our CMMC Summit. Allison Giddens of WinTech will share some new lessons learned, and we'll bring back the provider panel to answer some of your questions on scoping, best practices, and how to find help. We hope you'll find today's session helpful, informative, and a reminder to get started on your journey towards CMMC and increased cybersecurity today. Thank you again for joining us. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at cyberedgeinfo@georgia.org or visit our landing page for more resources at georgia.org/cybersecurityedge.
Keep your CMMC or really any cybersecurity strategy simple. You need to stay focused on the best practices and remember that bottom line, this is all about risk management. So where are you most at risk? Some good places to start are making sure that you have MFA implemented, endpoint protection, incident response plans, multiple backups, and that you've made sure the backups actually work. But whatever you do, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. If you take small steps. I saw a great quote that said that Rome wasn't built in a day, but every day a brick was laid. Look at things that way and work to be further along than you were just last month. Stay the course. If you finally have an asset list, make a calendar reminder to verify it once a quarter or even monthly if that's more appropriate. Once you've done the work, make sure that the work stays valid. Over the past year and a half, I've learned that no matter what anyone tells you, there is no perfect solution, no one-stop fix, one thing fits all. No one can guarantee you compliance. If anyone markets that and says so to you, you need to run as fast as you can in the other direction. There are lessons learned that you can glean from other businesses that are similar to yours, because it's not, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you need to get out there and talk to people, join industry association groups, and be just as open to share info as you are to receive it with them. Looking back, there were plenty of things in the rearview mirror that I initially got hung up on and plenty stressed and losing sleep over in the early days, such as FIPS and whitelisting. And I very quickly came to realize that I was signing up for an Ironman before I could run a 5K in less than 45 minutes. So it's important to remember to try not to bite everything off at once. Take some small steps. And again, it's all about risk management. So focus on where your biggest risks are. As a small business, chances are you're someone who handles the IT and other things too, and you're spread thin and trying to prioritize a lot. In the beginning, I watched as many webinars as I could. I talked to as many people that I thought were like me as I could. I kept salespeople at arm's length because I just assumed they could smell my cluelessness a mile away. Don't commit to long-term contracts, especially if you don't quite understand what it is that you're signing, especially not if they promise the world. Find your go-to resources. Stay organized and document the heck out of everything that you're doing, whether it's on a poem, whether it's on some sort of side document that you're not sharing with anyone. You're going to be able to see your progress and stay motivated that way. If you can take baby steps today, then you're going to be further ahead than you were last month. It might not seem like much now, but I promise in the long run, if all you're doing is looking at risk, it's much more than you were doing this time last year.
Hadley, and I am with the law firm of Adams and Reese, but I'm also a member of the CMMC task force here in Georgia. And the task force mission is to really help you, somebody or an entity in the Georgia Defense Industrial Base to become CMMC compliant. That's a lot going on, a lot to be said, but what we want to do today, earlier we had a provider panel where we talked about what you need to be thinking about, real world advice and guidance on what you should be thinking about with respect to CMMC compliance, taking into account where you are, taking into account resources, that sort of thing, or those sorts of things. So today we had so many questions coming off of the last panel, we decided to do version 2.0. So we've got a great panel going here today, and I think you're going to be really happy to listen to this. One thing I will say just from a housekeeping standpoint, if you want to see this again, this will be recorded and we'll have access to it and the prior discussions that the task force has put on, including the prior provider panel, and that can be found, I have to read it here, is at georgia.org/cybersecurityedge, or you can email to cyberedgeinfo@georgia.org, and someone will get back to you. I'll mention those again at the end of the discussion today, so no need to hurry and scurry and write it down because I will mention it again. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I will briefly ask each panelist to give a real brief synopsis of what they do, who they are with, and what their company does, because that's going to help you to understand the providers on the panel, but also understand what you might need from a resource standpoint. So first, and these are in no particular order other than the order that they're listed on my sheet here. We have Ron Talwalker, who's with MasterCard. I'll let him tell you in a minute his title and what he does. We have Chris Silvers with CG Silvers. We have Zachary Hodges with Cybersecurity Solutions. And last and certainly not least, we have Karl Bickmore with SnapTech. So with that, I'm going to reverse the order and ask Karl, because he's was last, but certainly not least, to be first now. And just tell us a little bit about you and what your company does, Karl.
Sure, thanks, Roy. Well, we are what's referred to as a managed IT provider with locations in Georgia and the Cumming area, North Atlanta, and also in Tempe, Arizona, the Phoenix area, and the San Francisco area. And we help companies do security and compliance and standard IT services as well. And our focus has been on clients in the defense industrial base.
Fantastic. Chris.
Hey, Roy. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Your reviews were, you got rave reviews last, so we'll bring him back.
Yeah, I guess so. Go figure, right?
Right.
So, hey, everybody. I'm Chris Silvers, Atlanta native, born and raised in a little bit north of Atlanta, Kennesaw, Georgia. So basically, in terms of CMMC, I've kind of gone all in, I guess. I'm a registered practitioner. I'm a provisional assessor, provisional instructor, as well as my company, CG Silvers Consulting, is a C3PAO candidate, right? Along with about 200 of my closest friends. So in addition to compliance work as far as CMMC, CG Silvers Consulting also performs penetration testing, social engineering, some information security education, as well as incident response consulting.
Fantastic. Zach.
Hey, thanks again for having us on. So Zach Hodges, I'm the VP COO of Cybersecurity Solutions. We're a registered provider organization. Myself and several other members of my team are RPs. Kind of like Chris, we've made a large pivot into supporting the DoD supply chain and CMMC as a whole. So we come in, we provide some turnkey services that help you not just meet but maintain your CMMC or DFARS compliance.
And thank you. And then finally, Ron. And I know you're with MasterCard, and I think people are going to be surprised when you kind of tell what you do and what MasterCard can do in this area.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And again, thank you also for having me back. Enjoyed the last conversation. And I will say that, it is often confused that we are just the back of a card with the two circles, and it's the MasterCard, the credit card. But I've been here about a year now, Director of Product Management Sales in our North America division under Cyber Intelligence and Solutions. And so we've actually, for the last several years, started kind of everything from fraud, account takeover, so payment sort of capabilities and services associated with a lot of the things around e-commerce fraud, but even cyber risk. So we're building a lot of capabilities, both organically, and we've made acquisitions in this space. I mean, to a large degree, MasterCard is a practitioner, right? We have petabytes and petabytes of data that we have to protect for our customers. And so it was logical for us to kind of go on this journey around cybersecurity to start looking at how do we secure payments and transactions in this sort of evolving ecosystem. So we're becoming a lot more sort of experienced that space, and we're offering services. For example, I support a capability called Risk Recon, which is about supply chain, right, management. That's a big area of risk these days with supply chain attacks continue to grow. So yeah, CNI or Cyber Intelligence Solutions is really an area which provides us everything from fraud capabilities to cyber risk and hygiene. And that fits really within CMMC well.
Okay, fantastic. So, we talk about CMMC, and, Zach, I'm gonna put this first question to you. CMMC has been around for a while. CMMC will obviously be around for a while. One of the things that we often hear is, do I have to comply? When do I have to comply? Where are we on that CMMC spectrum, so to speak? I know sometimes, you hear companies say, well, we've got a while before we have to comply. Is that true? And kind of where are we on that timeline?
Yeah, that's a great question, Roy. So we just got asked this question on a panel at AFCEA TechNet last week. And we actually got some resonation from the crowd. So far, we've gotten a lot of pushback and a lot of that same feel of, well, it's not here yet.
Right.
So where we're at today and what we've heard recently is that we know that there's 3 C3PAOs that have been listed on the AB website as ready to go, right? So they could technically do scans today or do assessments today. But what we're looking at is what we've heard is there's a group of 30 or so companies that they want to run through the process first. And they're waiting until the AB and the DoD is waiting until they get 5 or 6 C3PAOs put together to start doing those assessments. So a big piece of what we've been explaining to people is don't wait. We just did a big contract with the state of Georgia, actually with Cassia and Amy's office, on assessment scans to kind of understand where people are today. And we got that question, well, do we have to start CMMC now and today? And the questions is no, you don't have to start today, but you're at a disadvantage to those other companies that may be ahead of you, some of your competitors that may get opportunities that you failed to get for not being compliant when the time comes.
That's great advice. And you're right. I mean, people tend to procrastinate, and this is not an area that procrastination is going to be your friend. Zach mentioned 3 CPAOs and some in waiting, and I know you're kind of in waiting yourself. What do you tell people? 2 things, 2 questions here. One, what do you tell people about that when they say, well, there are no C3PAOs out there anyway, so we don't have to do it? But then secondly, and this is probably the bigger question, is getting towards resources. What if somebody says, well, I can't afford to buy, to hire a C3PA, or I can't afford to do these types of assessments, or, and this is a question for everybody, how much is it going to cost me to do this thing? And, people that are listening today really run from, companies that haven't really done much all the way to companies that are well down that path. But what do you say to people? And this is to Chris.
Oh, okay. I thought you were still talking to Zach. I was ready to hear the answer, Zach. I was like, yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So, Roy, it's interesting. The CMMC ecosystem is changing, right? In fact, I had to kind of go out to their website to check, because I was on a forum call earlier today where the fourth C3PAO was approved. So with Boston Government Services, and that was on Friday. I think it was like a 5 o'clock Friday kind of thing. So yeah, I know it's weird. That's how fast this is moving, and it's really weird. It's been kind of a hurry up and wait type situation where they came out, they had all these great plans earlier this year about that there were going to be 15 contracts, and any supplier involved in those 15 contracts was going to need to be certified before the end of the year. And they were expecting the training to roll out tomorrow or September 1st. Turns out that it looks like the training's not going to be starting to roll out until like third week of October, first week of November. And that's just for the CPP training. That's like the first level assessor training, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And the other thing, what I tell people is, it doesn't cost anything but time to learn about CMMC. Right. There is a lot of information out there. Now, who wants to go read, a 100-page document on the ins and outs of CMMC? Not me, obviously, but that information is out there, and I don't think it's too late or too soon to study it and to learn about it.
Right.
Because there are some hints you can get ahead of yourself. I've got several clients that I've been working with on doing what we call a gap analysis.
Okay.
So what that means is I come in and basically do like a mock assessment. I don't tell them exactly what they need to do to be compliant. And the reason I don't is because if I don't tell them exactly what to do consulting, then they can engage me later to do the certification assessment without any conflict of interest. So that's kind of where I pitch it over to folks like Karl and Zach and Ron to help them design their remediation solution. Right. So I think it's important to kind of separate this into basically 3 stages, right? You first get an idea of how far you are along the lines, because some of these companies that I talk to, they actually have a lot more going on security wise than they think. And then they can realize, okay, well, now I know how big the elephant is and what bites I need to start taking. Right. So do that initial gap analysis, then go through a remediation process, which is probably going to be 6 months, a year, right? Expect that, then get to where you're ready to get a certification. Don't think that you're going to do that in one day.
Gotcha. So that's really helpful in terms of helping people to understand the timeframes that you say something. And so I'm going to throw it to Karl and to Ron to get your thoughts on this. And, there are a lot of providers out there, we have 4 great ones on the panel today, a lot of providers out there. If you are just starting your CMMC journey and you're trying to find a provider, what questions should you be asking those providers? What certifications should you be looking for? You can Google it and say, CMMC assessor, or, you know, but does that get where you want to go, especially given kind of the time frame and the timeline that Chris just laid out? Karl, Ron, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Thanks, Roy. So here's the thing. And the first is that, you know, the accreditation body, CMMCAB, has registered providers, third-party assessment organizations, and registered practitioners. And to be perfectly frank, when you're looking for somebody to guide you on your CMMC journey, you should be looking for somebody that is a registered practitioner, part of an RPO or an auditor. And I like the way Chris put it, because you really can't run both sides of the fence. Somebody helps with the process and gives advice on it. Somebody does the auditing, and you need to have that separation. That's why there's the two different areas. But if you're not working with one of those organizations, you can't be assured that the organization or the person is actually fully, correctly up to date on the CMMC process, and actually has been background checked and is correctly accredited for it per se. And so, you know, the auditing group is excellent to be aware of and to talk to, and the registered practitioners are the ones that can actually dig in and actually take you through the IT changes necessary that you'll need to do. And I have a couple of comments about the timing thing. In my experience, I've seen some companies, the way Chris, where they referred to, where they have a lot of security things already going on. But I must say, in my experience, I see a lot more that are at ground zero. And in my opinion, the biggest reason for lack of hesitation is that they don't know where to start, and they underestimate the amount of effort that would be put into it. I was talking to a gentleman running a machine shop that's a downline from a prime subcontractor in California just last week, and he showed me like 3 or 4 information security policies and said, we've been telling people we're level 3, and this is his evidence of it. I'm like, well, we need to start at the beginning with this guy. You know, it's like he has no idea. And 6 months to a year, in my opinion, is the amount of remediation or planning if you're already in good shape. If you are still at the ground zero, it could easily be a couple of years. And in my opinion, that's where the real reason to get moving quickly and to begin understanding and begin the process, because, you know, in a couple of years, everybody's going to be wanting their assessment. Chris is going to be a busy man, and you won't be able to get the auditor to come when you want them to. There's only going to be so many of them. And so, you know, look, you can put it off as long as you want, but it seems ill-advised, especially since the whole purpose here is to protect our national supply chain. And every time you're doing one of these things that's required, you're helping protect, you're improving your organization's cybersecurity. You are doing the things to keep your organization running and preventing the bad things from happening. And so there's good reason to be after it anyway. It's something you should be doing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna.
Please.
Yeah. Well, I think your last comment is near and dear to me, because it's, you know, there is the getting business and going through this to make sure you can actually bid on something, because you have to be at you know, one of the levels, but it's also protecting yourself, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's the goal. Yes, there's business that you want to get to. I would also say, on top of everything Karl just said, you know, people are looking for more automated ways to understand what their compliance is, right? And now there are a lot of tools out there that can map your cyber risks associated with yourself and your vendors back to the latest CMMC levels. It's something we do. Many tools, many capabilities out there that provides you an automated way to say, okay, here are the where you fail, and do you have compensating controls or not? So, you know, I would recommend people to look for those, because in addition to actually getting, as you said, the people that are going to help you around the journey, you also want the right tools that can actually be more efficient, right? And finding where you're lacking controls. So that's another thing to look at.
You're wrong. That's a really great point about the tools, but I want to make sure everybody understands that once you're pushing into level 2 and level 3, a significant amount of this is about policy and procedure that a scan will never tell you. It's a matter of seeing that actual document, seeing it in action, seeing the audits and the evidence of that as well. The scans are super helpful, though, because they really give you a feel and a way of checking and auditing what's going on. So I totally agree with you, but just remember that once you're past level 1, that you have a lot of policy and procedure and documentation that's also part of the thing. And even some of the requirements are about your hiring practices and whatnot. So there is more than just what a scan can tell you, but scans are great, and the right tool is critical for getting a good scan.
Great points. One question that has come up a lot with me is, especially for companies that are just trying to get their arms around this whole CMMC thing, and that is, hey, look, we do a lot of things at my company. About 10% of what we do is in the DoD supply chain. The other 90%, we're B2B, we're B2C. We don't do anything there related to the DoD. Do I have to get my whole company certified to a particular level, CMMC 3? Can I segregate it? What does this thing called scoping mean? All of those questions that are really at the forefront of people's minds. And so, Zach, I'd love to get your thoughts and everybody's thoughts on, what do I have to do if I only do 10% or 50%, but my whole business is not in the DoD supply chain?
That's a great question. And that comes up very often, Roy. So you may deal with a manufacturer who makes one small part for a Boeing or a Lockheed or other large prime, and the rest of their company profile, the rest of their business units are all commercial. So we do run into that a lot. How we approach that, there's two ways. So yes, there's always a way that you can scope the network. There's always a way that you can set up an enclave to kind of separate those two environments. However, I don't believe that people should look at it as it's two different worlds in a sense, right? So maybe your policies, your procedures, certain other aspects, for CMMC need to be taken care of. However, how we view it as a security company is you should want to protect your entire environment. You should want to protect your entire environment as well as you can. I think that oftentimes we look at these compliance-driven areas and we say, oh, it's expensive, or, oh man, this is going to take so much time. But we have to take a step back and not look at it from a compliance perspective purely. Look at it as look at it from a security perspective. This is going to allow me to better protect my network. There's nothing that CMMC is asking, that the requirements are asking these companies for that's going to hurt them, right? Implementing multi-factor authentication, which, by the way, that's an easy, if you're looking for some low-hanging fruit, something to implement early on that can kind of protect you, right out the gate, that's an easy one. But having proper policies and procedures to how your organization, how your employees are going to act or interact when it comes to sensitive information or using their computers, down to the equipment that you put in to protect. So I get it that there's a large expense for a lot of companies that have nothing implemented today, which is, as Karl mentioned before, that's what we're seeing a lot of. There's not a lot, we go in and do these assessments. We don't see a lot of SIMs installed. We don't see a lot of heavy policies and procedures that are surrounded by IT or security requirements. But as you're going in and you look at all these things that CMMC is kind of mandating, none of it's out there to hurt you. It's only going to help you protect your employees, your customers' information, or your proprietary company information. So,
So Chris, I saw you kind of shaking your head. I'm not going to say whether you were shaking it up or whether you're shaking it.
Yeah. Well,
you're shaking your head. I'll leave it at that. And
no, I think it's kind of interesting. I sort of go back and forth a lot of times because when I'm working with small businesses, there is a drain on productivity and profitability with security. I mean, let's face it. Let's be real. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday when we were talking about password reuse and the fact that she has about 3 different passwords that she uses across the 100 different platforms that she logs into, Facebook and Twitter and whatever, right? And we were talking about it, and I'm like, look, you can use a password manager, right? And you can have a different password for all each different platform. And she's like, yeah, that's great, but then I have to pay for that, and then I have to install it on different devices. And she just starts going through the how onerous it might be to implement a password manager. And I think everybody in the security industry agrees password manager is a good thing, right? That you should have a password manager. Absolutely. Just like MFA. But at the same time, MFA is a pain. Okay. Getting a text on your phone and having to type in another code, it's a pain, right? So when I think that segmentation is important, not even just from a compliance standpoint, but from a security standpoint. As a penetration tester, I know that when I break into a computer and I realize I can't get to the other computers because of some network segmentation, that frustrates me. And that's a good thing. When your penetration tester is frustrated, that's a good thing. That means you're doing something right. But at the same time, I think that segmentation and reducing the scope of your compliance environment is a good thing as well, because there's not really a one size fits all of security. Not everybody needs auditing turned on to the 9th degree on every single server, because let's face it, that does cost money. SIEMs cost money. It costs money to run a security operations center and develop an incident response capability. So I see scoping as a great way to make affordable security. It also forces the business to kind of compartmentalize and think about, what business they're doing and what's worth it. Because the other thing, Roy, is you get a company that's doing 10% of their business in defense industrial base related business. And when they start piling on the CMMC compliance related costs, they may realize maybe we shouldn't be in this business, right? It may just not be a smart business decision to be in this risk environment. It may not be worth it.
Yeah, and I do agree with some of the parts that Chris is saying as well. So it does make sense for some of the cost restraint areas. Some businesses can't even afford to continue to do business with the DoD if this is going to be a very costly addition. I think from what we've seen out in the environment, some of the questions we've asked is where we say it's hard to do segmentation or it's hard to enclave is on the process side, right? So you can kind of set a network to do whatever you want that network to do. But where you run into issues is when you can protect everything that you send out. You can protect everything that you store internally. What's hard to manage is what you receive. So if you're not protecting, all of the email accounts, and now CUI is sent to someone who wasn't on the protected side or the CMMC side of the network, and that information's there and no one's there paying attention, you can run into issues. And then who does the blame go on? The DoD for sending it to the account in your organization, or your organization for not protecting all devices? So we do have situations where we employ enclave environments, but we have to make sure that it makes sense and that they're stable enough that there has to be some stability and some control within that organization to maintain that environment and the processes that take place within.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I just jump in here real quick. I think this is a classic case here, Roy, of people make the mistake that thinking compliance and cybersecurity are the equal things. They're not. There's a great case where you maybe segment out some area of your network and make it 100% compliant. So federal contract information, COI, never touches anything else. Go for it, And I think it's a smart way to do it from a budget standpoint where it makes sense. But don't mistake just doing that as now you've solved your cybersecurity problem.
Right.
That's the big key, right? You got to. Every business owner should want both, right? They should want to be compliant. They should want cybersecurity to the right level and according to the risk level and their risk tolerance, right? And so they should be aware of that. They should get good advice. But segmenting can be a smart way to do. You could set up some things really that could really reduce the cost of your email flow by setting up solutions that segment out the way you can receive it, as an example. And that really is, in my opinion, the secret to it costing less and it taking less time is smart scoping. But, don't forget that overall cybersecurity hygiene is needed. There's still the level 1 hygiene of the 17 controls. And if you're not doing those like across the board, it probably doesn't make any sense to go any further. So scoping is a great question. It's smart. It needs to be contextual. It's unique to every organization. But the key thing is don't confuse that with your overall cybersecurity picture.
That's a great point.
That is an excellent point, because I think a lot of times people do get those confused. And as somebody said, I forget who said it earlier, a lot of this CMMC journey, is not tools or, one particular thing, but it's really policies, procedures, it's hygiene, all of the above. And to, companies that are listening, that's, if there's one takeaway, I think that's what, it ought to be, that this CMMC journey really is a cybersecurity journey. And you need to be looking at it holistically and with, proper cyber hygiene in mind. Right. That's Roy's opinion. So we're getting close to the end here. And so I am going to ask, and I'll start with you, Ron, so you can kind of get the brain wheel turning. If there is one thing that you would say to the audience, realizing that, you've got companies that are just starting, you've got companies that are near the end of the journey. One of my colleagues said the Georgia Department of Economic Development kind of phrased it as you're trying to teach one class for kindergartners through PhD students. But if there's one thing that you could relay, one closing thought in terms of CMMC and that CMMC journey from a practitioner standpoint, or from a practical advice standpoint, what would it be? And Ron, I'm going to start with you. Okay, so we may have lost Ron here materially.
I'm back now.
Okay, there we go. I was about to go to Karl.
Yeah, yeah. This is the second time today, so yeah, I'm back live here, Roy. Thank you.
Okay.
I think I caught your question. So listen, I think playing a little bit of what Karl said, because I think that was on my mind as I listened to this conversation. It really comes down to, are you leading with CMMC or leading with cybersecurity, and understanding that at the end of the day, right? I look at something like CMMC.
Oh, it was tip of his tongue. I was right there.
That's right. We're waiting with bated breath. So Karl, we'll go to you, and we'll let Ron get reconnected here, but we'll go to you, Karl.
Okay, one thing, I think the biggest gap from a business owner or a manager's standpoint is an educational gap. And so I'd say start with just learning the 17 controls of level 1. It's basic hygiene stuff, and just a lot of it, even if you're not technical, you would probably understand. It's simple things like, who can access the network? Are you restricting admin rights? Do you have password sharing going on? There's some really basic hygiene things that you might be able to say, okay. And if you don't have those things like really nailed, then you're at the beginning, and that's the education that you need to journey, that what you need to go on. And I just think it's an education gap first.
Fantastic. Ron, back to you.
Yeah, I think I'm back now, hopefully. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, we'll see if this lasts. Apologize. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I ended up, is that really focusing on understanding, are you driving with business need, or you're trying to lift your posture? And focusing on cybersecurity posture for you and who you work with, I think is an important part of the goal that you should be thinking about. And based on that, understanding scope, as Karl said, is important, right? Figure out what's low-hanging fruit, what you need to get your business done, but where do you need to be fully secure in all your sort of interactions and relationships?
Fantastic advice. Zach?
Yeah, I think for me, what we hear a lot about is cost. We hear a lot about pain of implementation, and then how do you select that right vendor? I think it's important that, especially for small business owners, reach out to some of the state or other organizations that provide a lot of assistance. There are grants out there. There are other ways to help, but I think most importantly, it's shop. Like, don't just go and buy, you don't go to a dealership and buy the first car you see. Talk to multiple providers when you're out here. See what makes sense. Once you do those first steps, like Karl and Ron are saying, kind of educate yourselves. Now, when you talk to a provider, you can ask them, if you need that outsourced help, you can ask them, what do you provide out of this list? So I think, everyone's kind of hit those points of either you're going to put compliance or security first. Some of those points are being kind of pushed right now because people really have to understand that cybersecurity is not just a cool word that people use now. There's a lot to it, and it's a lot less costly to be proactive in the cybersecurity world than it is to be reactive.
Absolutely. That is so true.
Yeah.
So true. Chris, we will close it out with you. Chris, our registered practitioner, our soon to be 3PA. I always get it. C3PAO sounds like Star Wars there.
That's right.
Soon to be, your final thought.
Well, I think I want to kind of pick up on something Karl and Ron were talking about, the policy and procedure, because CMMC is actually a little bit unique compared to other compliance frameworks in that it requires adoption of practices. And this is kind of a key here, because it's not even, Karl was talking about the 17 controls. They've even changed the language, right? They talk about 17 practices. And I was on an engagement a couple of weeks ago with a manufacturer, and instead of just showing me a policy or even a detailed procedure, show me that you're actually doing these things, right? That you're kind of living these practices. And where does that start? That starts at the top. So you've got to have executives who, to kind of touch on what Karl was saying as well, is it's education. You've got to train the executives to start living and breathing some security awareness, right? Stop doing risky behaviors. And that's even one of the practices. It's under the security awareness and training, right? Do they recognize risky behaviors, and are they learning not to do those things, right? Don't send an email to an employee and ask them to go get a gift card for you over at Target and send you the gift card number, because that's what scammers do. And if you do it, then your employees are going to fall for that trick every time. Right.
So great advice, gentlemen. Again, I think anybody on the call today, on this webinar, this is a journey, but like all journeys, you have to take that first step. And so, I would say, take that first step. There are lots of resources, Zach said, there are a lot of state resources out there. Again, going to, the Georgia Department of Economic Development, which is going to be at georgia.org/cybersecurity edge, is going to be a great resource for you. I'm increasingly hearing other resources like CISA.org can potentially help with assessments and things like that around CMMC. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking part in this panel. As always, like last time, it was great. I know Angela Giddens, who is on her CMMC journey with her company, gave some great advice about her journey earlier. So that combined with this, just fantastic. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much and take care.